Okay, so welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving right into, I think, what's maybe the most important thing, the heart of what makes relationships work. All of our relationships thrive. Emotional intimacy. So think of this as a deep dive, like a crash course, in how we build and strengthen those really close connections with the people that are important to us.
I love that. A crash course in connection. That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and we've got a bunch of different perspectives here. We've pulled some, really cool relationship guides, some expert insights, and we're really on a mission to figure out the stuff that actually matters. What
Yeah.
can you use today to actually improve those connections?
And I think to really get started with this, it's important for everyone to understand what we mean by emotional intimacy.
Mm,
It's definitely more than just like feeling close to someone, right?
true.
It's about this deep sense of like being truly seen, known, and understood. And to get there requires a lot of vulnerability, cultivating empathy for your partner, and a foundation of trust built through communication. Honest, open communication. That's what Milton and Stockhausen, one of our sources, really emphasized.
Yeah, that makes sense. So being seen, known, and understood.
Exactly. And Barry, another source we have, adds to that, saying it's about being able to freely share your inner world, everything going on inside, and feeling totally accepted for who you are no matter what.
So it's like the freedom to just be yourself. Totally.
Yes. And then Del Valle, they describe it beautifully, calling it the glue that actually holds relationships together. This constant exchange, this sharing of thoughts, feelings, fears, hopes, dreams, everything.
Everything, the whole package. I like that a lot. So our listeners, are people who really want to get to the core of something, right? You want to understand it, you want to understand it fast, but you also want to understand it completely, like without getting bogged down, like with too much technical stuff. And that's what we're going for here. It's like, how do we get to those aha moments? And then, even more importantly, what can you actually do differently starting today? So let's get practical, right? Let's talk about what emotional intimacy actually looks like. Like, how do we know if we're experiencing it? What are the signs?
Well, luckily, our sources give us some really clear indicators. Milton and Stockhausen, they highlight things like, first and foremost, feeling safe and trusting the other person. Like, that's the
Yes.
foundation there.
Okay, safety and trust.
Yeah, and when you have that, it makes sense that physical affection comes more naturally, you know? Like, you feel comfortable being close, holding hands, cuddling.
That makes sense. So if you feel safe, it kind of unlocks that other stuff.
Exactly. And then they talk about this deep understanding between partners, almost like you can communicate without even saying words. And often, there's this shared sense of humor, inside jokes that only the two of you get.
Oh, yeah, I love that, the inside jokes.
And of course, like we talked about before, there's that willingness to really share what's going on inside, your thoughts, feelings, even when they're not so positive or easy to talk about.
So it's like opening up, letting them see all of you, not just the good stuff.
Right. And the cool thing is, this isn't all just theoretical. Milton and Stockhausen, they actually share examples from their own relationship. It's really relatable stuff like cuddling while they make coffee, making sure they have quality time together on the weekends, those silly jokes that make them laugh, and knowing that they can always rely on each other, especially when things get tough.
So it's like those everyday things, those little moments that really matter.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And what's even more fascinating is how quickly this sense of deep connection can sometimes develop. Milton and Stockhausen, they talk about a study by Arthur and Elaine Aron, where they brought complete strangers together and had them ask each other 36 increasingly personal questions. And get this, in just 45 minutes, many of these people felt a connection as strong or even stronger than they did in some of their long-term relationships.
Wait, 45 minutes? That is wild. So, like, strangers felt super close, like, really quickly. What was the magic ingredient there?
Well, the researchers, they said the key was this back and forth of revealing personal information, what they called self-disclosure. So as you share more about yourself, the other person gets to know you better, and that tends to create this feeling of liking and closeness. And that's exactly what Milton and Stockhausen emphasize. The more you share your inner world, and the more you really listen to your partner's inner world, the stronger that bond becomes. It all comes down to feeling truly seen and heard.
That is so powerful. And it makes you think, like, every interaction, every conversation is a chance to strengthen that bond. So let's get really practical here. What are some specific things people can do to actually build this emotional intimacy?
So Milton and Stockhausen, they have this phrase, genuinely give a shit. And I know it sounds like a little harsh,
Laughing, yeah, it's definitely straight to the point.
but the message is so important. It's about showing up for your partner with real care and concern. Like, when they're talking, are you really listening? Are you paying attention to what they're saying? Trying to understand their perspective? Do you respect their opinions even when you don't agree? Are you checking in with them, asking about their day, how they're feeling? It's about making an effort, showing them that they matter to you.
So it's like being present, being engaged, putting in the effort.
Right. And another key ingredient, which they emphasize a lot, is appreciation.
Appreciation. Okay.
Well,
Like saying thank you.
yeah, but it goes beyond just saying thank you.
Hmm.
Milton and Stockhausen, they talk about the work of John Gottman, a relationship expert, who talks about relationship masters and disasters. So the masters, these are the people who are always looking for things to appreciate in their partner and in their relationship. They're constantly expressing gratitude, fostering this culture of respect. On the other hand, you have the disasters who are more focused on what their partner is doing wrong.
So we want to be relationship masters, for sure.
Absolutely. And they take this even further with what they call advanced appreciation. It starts with simply noticing and being thankful for things your partner does, even the everyday stuff. But then you take it up a notch by expressing how that action impacts you. Like instead of just saying, thanks for doing the laundry, you can say, thanks for doing the laundry. It makes me feel so much more relaxed knowing we don't have to worry about it.
Okay, so you're getting more specific about the impact.
Right. And the most impactful level is when you actually share what that action reveals about your partner's character. Like, I really appreciate how thoughtful you are. Making me coffee this morning before my big meeting, that shows how much you care.
Wow. Okay, that is taking it to a whole other level.
And it makes such a difference. Now, this might sound a little strange, but another way they suggest building intimacy is by looking back.
Looking back, like dwelling on the
No,
past.
no, not like that. It's about intentionally remembering those happy memories you share, reliving those good times together. They even have this game they call Remember When. So you just start a sentence with remember when, and then fill in the blank with some positive memory.
Oh, I love that. Like, remember when we went on that crazy road trip? Or remember when we adopted our first pet?
Exactly. It's about tapping into your shared history, those experiences that are unique to your relationship.
I love that because it reminds you of all the good stuff you've been through together.
In Milton and Stockhausen, they actually link this to a psychology concept called capitalizing, which basically means sharing good news and celebrating those wins with your partner, which can really strengthen your bond.
So it's like consciously making an effort to remember and celebrate the good times?
Right. It reinforces the meaning you've created together, brings back those positive feelings, and naturally deepens that emotional connection. Now, this one might sound a little intense, but they also suggest something called contemplate their death.
Whoa, contemplate their death. That seems a bit morbid.
It does sound a bit heavy, I know. But it's actually rooted in this ancient philosophy called Stoicism and the idea of memento mori, which means remembering that we're all mortal. It's not about being negative or dwelling on death, but rather using it as a tool to appreciate the present moment.
Okay, so it's more about appreciating what you have right now.
Exactly. It helps you put things in perspective. Those little annoyances, those arguments about who forgot to take out the trash, they suddenly seem so much smaller when you remember that our time together is precious and limited.
That's a really powerful way to shift your perspective for sure. Okay, so we've got appreciation, reminiscing, contemplating mortality. Anything else?
Well, they also talk about the importance of creating what they call connection rituals. These are small, simple, but meaningful actions that you weave into your everyday routine.
Okay, like what kind of things?
It could be something as simple as sharing a cup of tea in the evening, having a regular date night, taking a few minutes each day to just check in with each other, a long hug before you leave for work, or even just putting on some music and dancing in the living room.
I love those. It's like those little rituals become these anchors for your connection.
Right. And the point is, it's not so much about the specific activity itself, but the intention behind it. It's about showing your partner that you value them and that you want to spend time with them.
I think those rituals are so important, especially as life gets busier and more demanding.
Now, getting to the heart of vulnerability, they talk about the importance of letting yourself be seen. This means being willing to share your authentic self, your opinions, your dreams, your fears, even the parts of yourself that you're not so proud of.
That's so hard for so many people, though.
It is. And that's why creating a safe and trusting environment is absolutely crucial. When you know you're not going to be judged or rejected, it becomes easier to open up. Another practical tip they offer is to ask better questions. We often get stuck in these surface-level conversations about logistics and to-do lists.
Oh, yeah, like did you pay the bills? Or what are we having for dinner?
Exactly. While those are necessary, they don't really help us connect on a deeper level. So making a conscious effort to ask questions that invite more personal sharing can make a huge difference.
So instead of, did you go to the grocery store? Maybe it's, what's something that made you smile today? Or, what are you feeling grateful for right now?
Precisely. And here's an interesting point they make. Don't initiate sex with affectionate touch.
Oh, that's an interesting one.
They explain that doing so can actually lead to misunderstandings and mixed signals. Your partner might think you just want to cuddle, but you have something else in mind, and that can make them feel uncomfortable. So it's about being clear and respectful about your intentions.
That makes so much sense. Keep those separate. Be clear about what you want.
Exactly. And they actually argue that purely affectionate touch, without any expectation of it leading to sex, can help build a stronger emotional bond. So let cuddles be cuddles and find other ways to initiate sexual intimacy. And when your partner does share something vulnerable with you, the most important thing is to listen to understand, not to fix.
That's a huge one. We all do that, right? Try to jump in and fix things.
It's so tempting, but often what your partner really needs is just to feel heard and validated. They're not necessarily looking for solutions, especially if it's something emotional.
So just be there, listen, empathize.
Exactly. And they also encourage us to get better at feeling bad things. Our culture often tells us to be positive all the time, but avoiding or suppressing negative emotions actually hinders our ability to be emotionally intimate.
So it's about allowing ourselves to feel the full range of emotions.
Exactly. The more comfortable we are with our own emotional landscape, the easier it is to be present with someone else's emotions.
And one of our sources, Andy Allen, he offers a really cool framework for understanding emotions. He calls it the ABC model.
Yes, the ABC model. It stands for activating event plus belief system, consequence, emotion. So often we start with the emotion like I'm feeling angry, but to really understand that anger, we need to dig deeper.
So it's like figuring out where that anger is coming from.
Right. Alan gives this example of feeling really emotional while watching the movie Taken. The activating event was the movie, but the reason it affected him so deeply was because of his belief system. After becoming a father, he started to believe that something terrible could happen to his own daughter, and that belief triggered all these feelings of fear and sadness.
So it's not just the event itself, but our interpretation of it, our beliefs about it, that shape our emotional response.
Exactly. He also talks about getting angry when he sees dirty dishes. The dirty dishes are the activating event, but the underlying belief is that those dishes make him feel like a failure. So by identifying that belief, he can start to work on it.
So it's about recognizing those underlying beliefs and how they're driving our emotions.
And doing this together with your partner can be incredibly valuable. They can offer a different perspective, help you challenge those negative beliefs. It's like exploring your emotional landscape together, which can be a really powerful way to connect.
That's amazing. So now let's shift gears a bit. We also have Robert Augustus Masters, who offers a slightly different but really compelling perspective on emotional intimacy.
Yes, Masters focuses on the idea that intimacy with our own emotions is actually the key to intimacy in our relationships.
So it starts with ourselves.
Exactly. He says we need to develop this deep understanding of our own emotional world, where our emotions come from, how we express them, and how they've shaped our lives. And then once we have that understanding, we can start to share our emotions authentically with our partners.
So it's like knowing yourself leads to being able to connect with others.
Right. Masters emphasizes the importance of emotional literacy, being able to identify and understand and express our feelings. He also talks about emotional healing, acknowledging and processing those past emotional wounds that might be holding us back.
So it's about doing that inner work first.
And one of the key things he says is that there are no inherently negative emotions. It's all about how we relate to those emotions. Emotional intimacy allows us to learn how to use all of our emotions constructively, which ultimately makes our relationship stronger.
I love that. So it's not about avoiding or suppressing emotions, but learning to embrace them, even the ones that are uncomfortable.
Right. And Masters points out that without emotional intimacy, relationships can become superficial, no matter how much you have in common or how good the sex is. He even gives this example with anger. He says that hostility is what we do with anger. So if we can develop a deeper intimacy with our own anger, we can start to understand it, see our choices, and express it in a healthier way.
That's such a powerful way to reframe it. It's not about getting rid of anger, but about learning to work with it.
Exactly. And he argues that the more we understand our own emotions, the more fulfilling our lives and our relationships become. So now that we've talked about what emotional intimacy is and how to build it, let's talk about what gets in the way. Why is this so hard for so many people?
Yeah, what are the barriers?
Well, Joanne Barry, she offers some great insights into this. One big one is simply the difficulty we have in revealing our true selves. There's this fear that if someone really sees us, flaws and all, they won't love us anymore.
Oh, yeah, the fear of rejection. That's huge.
And that fear often stems from past experiences. Maybe we've been hurt or betrayed, or maybe we have low self-esteem. Another barrier is a lack of trust, both in ourselves and in others. And Barry, she says this really beautifully. She says, emotional intimacy is like allowing someone else to hold your heart for a while, and you theirs. It doesn't work if you're not both doing it.
I love that quote. It really highlights the importance of mutual vulnerability.
Right. And she also points out that when we avoid intimacy, it can lead to unhealthy coping mechanisms, like addiction, as we try to fill that void in other ways. And fundamentally, she emphasizes that self-knowledge is essential. If we don't understand and accept ourselves, it's going to be really hard to be truly intimate with someone else.
So self-acceptance is the foundation.
Exactly. And Del Valle, they also talk about fear as a major obstacle. They say it's crucial to create that safe space where both partners feel comfortable being vulnerable.
So it's about building that foundation of trust and security.
Right. And Del Valle also points out that communication barriers can be a big problem. Misunderstandings, poor listening skills, making assumptions, all of that can really get in the way of emotional connection.
So it's not just about talking, it's about communicating effectively, listening actively, being honest and empathetic.
Exactly. Now, let's say a relationship has lost that emotional spark. Can it be rekindled? Can you rebuild emotional intimacy once it's gone?
Yeah, that's a great question. Is it possible to get it back?
Del Valle says it absolutely is, but it takes effort and it takes time. The first step is creating that safe and trusting environment again. You need to rebuild that foundation where both partners feel secure enough to open up.
So it's like going back to basics, creating that safety net.
Right. And then you need to work on your communication skills. Make sure you're really listening to each other, expressing empathy, being honest, and paying attention to those nonverbal cues.
So it's about being intentional, being present, putting in the effort to really understand each other.
Exactly. Del Valle also talks about the role of physical intimacy, how it can actually help strengthen the emotional bond. They emphasize that these two things are interconnected.
That makes sense. Physical intimacy can be a powerful way to express love and connection.
And Del Valle stresses the importance of ongoing nurturing. This means validating each other's feelings, expressing affection regularly, and making time for those shared experiences that bring you joy.
So it's about consistently showing up for each other, even in the small moments.
Right. And they also mention other dimensions of intimacy, like intellectual and spiritual intimacy, that can enrich a relationship.
So it's not just one thing, it's about connecting on multiple levels.
And they also talk about the importance of setting boundaries, especially when you're rebuilding intimacy. And they emphasize that it's okay to seek professional help if you need it.
Yeah, there's no shame in getting support. Sometimes we need a little extra help to navigate those challenges.
And both Del Valle and Remainly, they really highlight the importance of prioritizing quality time together and practicing gratitude. It's about appreciating what you have and making an effort to nurture that connection.
So make time for each other, express your appreciation. Those are key ingredients.
Absolutely. And Remainly, they add that emotional intimacy is just as important as physical intimacy. It's about feeling safe, accepted, and understood, allowing yourself to be vulnerable without fear of judgment. They also emphasize the value of shared activities, being curious about your partner's inner world, and expressing appreciation regularly.
So all of our sources are really emphasizing that this is an ongoing process, right? It's not a one-time fix. It's about consistent effort and attention.
Exactly. Emotional intimacy is a journey, not a destination.
I love that. So, to sum up our deep dive today, it's clear that emotional intimacy is a fundamental human need. It's what makes our relationships thrive and brings us that deep sense of connection and fulfillment.
And the good news is that we can all learn to cultivate more of it.
Yes, it takes effort, it takes vulnerability, it takes open and honest communication, but it's so worth it. And remember, even those small, intentional actions can make a big difference.
And as you go about your day, I want you to consider this. What is one small step you can take in your closest relationship today to deepen that connection? What can you do to show up with more care, more presence, more vulnerability? Choose one thing and put it into practice. You might be surprised by the impact it has.
That's a great challenge to leave our listeners with. Remember, emotional intimacy is a journey, and every step you take towards it is a step towards a more fulfilling and connected life.
And a more fulfilling relationship.
Absolutely.